You guys want to hear something absolutely insane? I worked in 11 practices everywhere from Medicaid, private, to large group DSOs, and I have seen clear aligners get paid out in almost every possible way. I've worked with over 150 dentists in my aligner training program and connected with several of the top providers via my social media page, where I've got over 45,000 followers, to see how they structure associate pay. The big takeaway was that some overcomplicated the payout structure for associates, while others seem to simplify it. And I'm telling you all this to show you that there is more than one way to pay associates, but there's only one way that makes the most sense for everyone involved. It wasn't always like this. When I started as an associate, I didn't know how I was going to get paid or what was considered fair and made sense for the owner at the same time. And I spent over 1,000 hours and I tried several strategies, and I found out more ways how to do this the wrong way before I figured out the best way to structure associate pay for aligners. And I'm gonna save you the thousands of hours and battle scars, and I'm just gonna tell you the best way to structure associate pay with aligners so that you are maximizing profitability while keeping it fair and simple for everyone. And the three most common payment structures are the following: production front load, rolling collections, and the start finish method. And in this training, I'm going to tell you how they work, what are the pros and cons of each one. Now, this training works for all brands. It does not matter which one you use. Feel free to take it and apply it to whichever aligner system that you're currently using. So imagine if you didn't have to change a thing when it came to paying your associates whenever they did aligners. Now, I want to tell you a story about this. So I was actually paid on a production-based model as an associate. And so I was getting paid like 30% production. And whenever I would do aligner cases, I would get paid 30% of what I produced. So an aligner case was around $6,000. I got paid 30% of that on the following paycheck. Now, I loved it because I was getting paid for everything up front. But after a couple months, my owner started to realize that this was not the best model for him because he was actually losing a lot of money up front. And the reason why is because of the way that ortho gets paid out. Now, for him to front load and pay me on production is great for the associate, but he's actually still waiting several months for the money to actually come in, whether it's from the patient or the payment plan or whatever system that they're using to collect payment. There is a lag that he is now eating. And some of you may be saying, oh, well, who cares? He's the owner. They should be able to do that. Well, the difference with this is this is a large amount of money that's being spread out over a period of time. And it also leaves the practice vulnerable to things like associate turnover, who gets paid when that doctor leaves. And also at the end of the day, the practice owner still needs to have some cash on hand to be able to pay out on this procedure. So the way a production front load looks is the following. For the example that I gave you earlier, let's say the doctor's getting paid 30% of production and 30% of the lab bill. In some instances, associates don't get charged the lab bill. Whatever rule that you're following for restorative bread and butter dentistry should be also applied to aligners. So you would calculate this just like you do restorative, right? So essentially, whatever the doctor produces minus the lab bill, you take 30% of that, and that is how much the doctor gets for everything that they do, restorative and aligners. And like I mentioned before, associate turnover is a thing. So for this model, if a doctor ever leaves, it's not the best thing when an associate comes in to replace them, because if that first doctor already got paid for the treatment based on this production model, how does that second doctor get paid? There's no more magical money that comes. And so this is one of the many gaps in this model when it comes to paying out docs for aligners. So again, this is a great model for associates because you get paid 30% of your production up front, but it's not the best situation for owners. So imagine if you didn't have to pay an associate until you actually received money for the treatment that they did. Now, this is an example of what you would get with a collections-based model. And I'm going to share a story with you on how this actually played out in practice. So there was an office that I worked at where I got paid on this rolling collections model. And at the beginning, I started a case and we got the patient to pay $250 to begin treatment. Of that $250, I got 30% of it. So I got $75 right at the start of the case. Then as the patient made their monthly payments for treatment, I got 30% of that money that was collected. So I was getting paid around $225 a month as those collections came in. The thing is, it was not that easy to have the transparency. And so I don't know if this was just with this owner. However, it can be very difficult for docs to track the payment and when they're coming in and giving the doctor a breakdown as to how and when they're getting paid, especially when it comes to ortho. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying that most owners struggle with paying out and having this transparency with their associates. And I know this because I've actually spoken with a lot of doctors who have tried this model and really weren't a fan of it. And that led them to actually not even wanting to offer aligners at all because they just felt like it was too complicated to pay out their associates. Now, with the rolling collections model, this is how it would look. It would be the same thing or very similar to how the production model was, which is you get 30% of your collections minus 30% of the lab bill, and you're calculating it just like you would any restorative procedure. The payment only happens when that money is coming into the practice, right? Now, this can be hard to track for some offices. There's a lot of questions and there's a lot of need for transparency because if associates are doing this procedure, they want to know when and how much they're getting paid for it. And so the owners have to be able to speak to it very clearly and very transparently. Again, what about associate turnover? Is the doctor going to remember to redirect collections payments to the second doctor when they come in to replace the original one? These are gaps in the collections model, and this can be okay for the owner. It's still not the greatest because of all the headaches that come with tracking and communicating, and it's definitely not a good situation for associates. So imagine if there was a simple way to pay your associates when they start and finish a case. So when I was going crazy with aligner cases, the model that I was being paid under was a start and stop method. And this was the greatest thing because when I started a case, I got paid a certain amount. And when I finished a case, I got paid the rest of it. That was it. Super simple, super clean. And if you take that model and you apply it to any associate, if there's ever associate turnover and they started a case, whoever the replacing doctor is, they come in and they finish the case, they still get compensated for the work that they're supposed to be doing. This solves for a huge issue that so many owners face because associate turnover is something that just happens in dentistry. And while associates want to get paid for the work that they do, owners also want to make sure that they're paying the associates to do the actual work. And the thing that I loved about the start and stop method was that it was easy to track because every month I knew how many cases I started, how many cases I finished, and it was super simple for the owner to pull those codes and show me on a statement how many cases I started, how many cases I finished, and how much I was going to get paid from that. And this left everybody feeling very, very happy. Now, how do you structure the start and finish method? It's going to mimic the framework that we used for restorative, right? And so the numbers that you got to calculate is how much are you charging for the procedure minus the lab bill, okay? And so whatever that number is, you're going to take whatever the percent that you get paid on, whether it's production or collection. So let's call it 30% for this example. So it's amount for the procedure minus the lab bill times 30%. Now, of that number, you get paid 60% at the start and 40% at the finish. And to track this, you would create an internal code that would track the starts and the finishes. And this is amazing because it solves for associate turnover because whoever starts the case gets paid and whoever finishes the case gets paid. Very clean, very easy to communicate. And this is actually used by the top performing DSOs and private practices across the country. And everybody is going crazy about this method. So to take that and put it into an example with numbers, let's say the associate pay is normally 30% of production and they're responsible for 30% of their lab bills. So aligners are being charged at $6,000. The lab bill is $1,500. This is giving you a difference of $4,500. Now take 30% of that. That gives you $1,350. And so of the $1,350, you're going to pay 60% of that at the start. So around $810. And you're going to pay 40% of that at the finish, which is around $540. And when you run payroll at the end of every month or billing cycle, you're going to want to remove amount collected or amount produced from ortho, okay? And then you're going to want to separately pull the D8090 and the D8090.S and the D8090.F codes. Those are your internal start and finish comprehensive ortho codes that you made. Then you're going to want to pay out on the starts and the finishes. Hope that makes sense. So I hope you found this valuable, and I wanted to let you know that I'm the founder of Clear Aligner Advisor, which is a clear aligner education platform that has successfully helped over 150 dentists integrate aligners into their practice, who have then gone on to generate over $9 million in revenue from aligners alone. We also have a couple of free training programs that you can dive into if you aren't ready to invest in education to level up your career just yet. Just go to clearalineradvisor.co. The link for that is in the description. But if you are looking for the structure and support of a training program, we do help docs in one of our 2 paid programs. Aligner Blueprint is our core curriculum online program, and Aligner Launchpad is our comprehensive program with unparalleled levels of support for docs who are starting and growing their practices with aligners. Now, if you want to go deeper on this topic of how docs are getting paid, what's the difference between production and collections, I made this video right here where I break down the difference between the two so that way you can know how much money do dentists actually make. I'll see you in there.